here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's February 13th here in Seoul. I'm Shin Yun, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Cheska Dainhong.
Good Monday morning, everyone.
Good Monday. And Walter Lee.
Always lovely to be here.
Both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. And every day we make a news feed for the new generation. We're looking at the top trending hashtags on social media over the past 24 hours. Here they are. The first hashtag is dead whales. The Cyprus government on Saturday said they would look into why 7 whales mysteriously washed up dead on the shoreline of the island's north coast. It's the first time that so many whales have been found dead, and scientists believe this could be from the deadly earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria. The second hashtag is Bondi. It's a new social networking app created by a Singaporean tech company where users can interact with virtual avatars. Since its launch last month, the app has topped multiple app store charts in Asia. Many have been sharing their fashion guides and room decor tips on social media, adding weight to the claim that Bondi has taken the Asian market by the storm. But there are still some rumors of credit card info leaks. The app's original privacy policy had the option of in-app purchases to buy NFT products on the platform. But the company has removed any mention of NFTs from its policy and rejected all claims related to leaking credit card info. The last hashtag is SM Entertainment. SM represents legendary K-pop artists from Poha, Girls' Generation to aespa and NCT. It was founded by the music producer Lee Soo-man, known as the godfather of K-pop. But last week, BTS's agency HYBE announced that it would become the biggest shareholder of its K-pop agency rival, and HYBE is set to pick up a roughly 15% stake in SM Entertainment, which makes BTS's label the largest shareholder of SM Entertainment. Now let's delve a bit deeper into the last hashtag, SM Entertainment. After the South Korean entertainment giants SM and HYBE announced their groundbreaking deal on Friday, people flocked to buy SM Entertainment shares. Its shares soared 16%, and HYBE stock first rose by 3% and then came down 1.5%. This acquisition is expected to shake up not only the Korean music sector, but also the global music industry. This new mega giant agency will hold both K-pop legends BTS and EXO, and it will give HYBE the upper hand to expand its global footprint. Before its acquisition of SM, HYBE had announced another major deal in the US, saying it would acquire Quality Control, a hip-hop label that represents artists like Migos. Now, if we expand our news feed here to the studio, Walter, what type of changes do you think we'll see in the K-pop industry following this measure? And are you hoping to see another legendary K-pop group come to life?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good and quite interesting move. I mean, you're taking SM, one of the original K-pop companies, you know, like you mentioned, Girls' Generation, even Super Junior, who really started that Korean wave, EXO, etc., and you're mixing it with HYBE, sort of the new generation, or like our generation, of K-pop artists. And I guess we can only think of one name when we think of HYBE, which is BTS, right? But they do have up-and-coming bands such as New Jeans and Hyphen as well. They are some really good bands and very popular bands out there. So it's going to be interesting to combine those two styles together, and you know, having a bit of old school and a bit of new school. And I definitely think there's going to be a huge band coming from these two companies.
So you're more having a positive prospect of what would be happening.
Definitely positive, yes.
Right, and on the contrary, are there any concerns you might have, Cheska?
It's definitely a very exciting move, and it can add the engine to the K-pop globalization that is happening right now. However, there's always this concern about the monopolization of industry when these two big conglomerates kind of come together, and especially in the arts and entertainment, I think diversity is always key. So I wonder if it's going to be like a one solution all for all sorts of K-pop artists that are coming through. And also, SM pretty much represents Suman Lee. So
as the name suggests.
As the name stands. So I wonder if SM would still maintain its color now that HYBE is, you know, joining with SM.
All right, those were very good points you both brought up, and that was our news feed for this Monday. Moving on, every day we discuss different topics that interest or are directly related to the younger generation. So here's what we have for you today. Since last year, one term that's been trending a lot is quiet quitting, especially among the younger generation. Quiet quitting is when you just do the right amount of work to get your paycheck. It doesn't mean you're slacking off, but it also doesn't mean that you're going above and beyond to achieve something more at work. Today, News Gen looks at 3 questions. 1. Why are millennials and Gen Z into quiet quitting? 2. How does the younger generation perceive the workplace differently from previous generations? 3. Will this trend continue? If so, what are some pros and cons? As we just saw, we're going to talk about another work trend among the new generation. It's quiet quitting. And some may think it's when you just quietly leave your job and don't tell your coworkers that you're no longer going to be at work, but it actually has a different meaning to it, right, Cheska?
Right. So it started with an American TikToker, Zaid Khan, who posted this very scenic and anodyne video of bubble gun blowing, and it said, it's not quitting your job, as the name stands, but you're quitting the lifestyle of going above and beyond. So it's actually steering away from this hustle culture into more of a culture of taking care of yourself and not letting the product or the outcome of work define the value of you as a person. And surprisingly, it has become an extremely mainstream culture for a lot of our generation at work. And I think it's a combination of the post-pandemic work culture that we have with the changes in the work environment, plus our generation's need and focus on our self-care and the demand to have our own time.
Definitely, and that's why I think a lot of the younger generation can relate to this concept. But Walter, have you ever heard about this concept yourself?
Yeah, I have heard of the concept myself. I'm kind of against it, to be honest with you. I'm one of these old school people who tries to do as much as I can for my work and try to impress and always, I guess, tire myself out at the end of the day. But it does remind me of a concept in Australia where we say chuck-a-sickie. Chuck-a-sickie.
Okay.
So basically it means to take a sick day off. Now, chuck-a-sickie, right? So, however, in Australia, sometimes we're not even sick. We just want to have a day off. And so what we will do is we'll call in and we'll pretend we're sick. And sometimes if your boss knows you well enough, they probably know that you're faking it. But we'll call in and we'll be like, oh, sorry, I can't come in today. I've got a bit of a stomach ache.
That's very natural.
Yeah, I mean, I chucked many sickies in my life. So this is kind of related because we don't do it because we're really sick. We do it because we want some of that extra time off. And since we have so many sick days off in Australia, we sometimes want to use them for our personal, life.
Right, I see. Because you prioritize life outside of work. And I hear that's a trend among millennials and Gen Z, but there are any stats that can back the claim up that quiet quitting has become such a norm?
Absolutely. So it has actually garnered a pretty loud reaction for a term that is quiet quitting.
Love that.
I know, it was a play on words. I prepared that for sure. So let's take a quick look at the screen here that illustrates this trend in numbers. So this first graph was a survey of almost 1,500 Koreans in their 20s and 30s. And if you see, almost 80% of people responded positively to quiet quitting.
80%.
80%. And I was actually quite surprised at the remarkably high percentage. And if we take a look at the second graph, it highlights some of the key factors that have led to this phenomenon. So the top reason was about compensation. And as mentioned earlier, quiet quitting means acting your wage. So nowadays, people don't want to be forced to do that extra work or commitment without what they deem proper in terms of compensation. And if you look at the second, third, and fourth reasons, they, I think, all have a common theme, which was to have the freedom to care about and prioritize their own personal life, as Walter said, to chuck a sickie or like to have that extra time, right? Which all really tie with our generation's focus on self-care and this notion that they want to separate work and life.
Right, so if we sum it up, quiet quitting basically means acting your wage. And Walter, what do you think about this?
I was very shocked to see that over 79% of people are positive for this. I mean, as I said before, I'm sort of I was taught by the older generation, the boomers, to work really hard at your job, to go in 15 minutes early at the least all the time, make sure you really impress your boss. So I'm
have that coffee ready for
have
you
that coffee. Not so much sucking up. Not so much sucking up. But like for me, I've had that built in my work ethic for many years. I mean, I've been working full time for, let's not talk about how many years, but a very long time. And so I have worked with these people who are the quiet quitters before, and it does make me feel uncomfortable. Now, I understand them, I sympathize with them. However, as a person who is that hard worker, I'm not saying that they aren't, but let's say that they aren't, it does make me feel a bit sad sometimes working in an environment with many, many quiet quitters.
And I think it's because that has to do with more of teamwork and working together for a specific project. But I think the quiet quitters that we're talking about prioritize life outside of the workplace. And Cheska, why do you think the younger generation just perceives the workplace different from boomers or older generations?
So it is what's known as the post-pandemic zeitgeist. So it is a combination of job insecurity, plus what has happened to our work environment post-pandemic, plus the combination of the very unique characteristic that our generation have in terms of wanting to secure that balance between our own personal life and personal growth.
Work-life balance.
Exactly. Separate from what the workers and our boss may demand of us, they might not align with the values that we might find important. And while there are some criticisms, as Walter mentioned, that people are slacking off or being too soft, actually a lot of experts are saying that this could be a wake-up call for a lot of the employers and companies to take an action. So as Harvard Business Review has mentioned, the company has to make the first move in order to secure talent. And they said it might be better to recalibrate the values from demanding hustle culture from their workers to actually doing what's called citizenship crafting. So building an environment where workers can actually flourish and have these conversations to meet sort of in between and going towards the same goal.
It's definitely worthwhile because a growing number of workers are from the younger generation.
Exactly.
And if they value self-care and happiness, companies should definitely catch on to this trend.
Absolutely.
But Walter, it's not only a trend here in Korea. I hear that the concept of quiet quitting first formed in the United States, right?
Yeah, well, Jessica actually briefly mentioned before that it started off with a TikTok. Now, I know that it gained really big popularity in the US on this platform, which is now, I guess, the biggest social media platform in the world. Now, originally there was a one-sided view sort of for, I guess, quiet quitting. And now there is this mixture of for and against, basically both parties poking fun at each other, boomers calling the younger generation soft and vice versa, like we said before. But there was a very big, I guess, emphasis on you're replaceable, your company doesn't love you, so therefore you should, do the least amount of effort, which is the negative side of quiet quitting. But like you mentioned before, people were more interested in their personal life rather than at work.
Right, and it's quite natural because everyone wants to feel valued
Yes,
and needed at work.
And recognized for what they do.
Definitely. And why don't we hear from an expert on what she thinks about this phenomenon to extend our talks? We're now going to be speaking with the head of Korea for GP in the Asia Pacific region. She's also in HR. It's Sarah Park. Great to have you here again, Sarah.
Great to be back.
All right, and Sarah, as we just mentioned, quiet quitting first started in the United States, but what are some distinctive traits among American quiet quitters?
Okay, so I know it was mentioned briefly earlier, but to reiterate it, quiet quitting refers to a situation where employees feel disengaged and disillusioned at their work and resort to doing the bare minimum required to get by. So instead of quitting the job entirely or switching to a new job, quiet quitting is when the employees stay in the same job, but they feel unmotivated to put effort in their work.
Right.
So in the US, distinctively, according to a study done by Gallup, 50% of the American workforce are actually considered quiet quitters. And many of those quiet quitters fit the definition of being not engaged at work. So they come into work at 9, they leave at 5. They're what we call the 9-to-5 staff. And they're really watching the clock to get off work with the least effort required, as they've already become psychologically detached from their job. And this has been a trend starting in the US and it's followed globally in the last year or so. It came after the great mass resignations that happened in 2021 and early 2022, where there was mass resignation everywhere. And in a way, quiet quitters are the ones who didn't quite take the plunge of quitting entirely. They've decided to hang on to their jobs, but put in the least effort required.
I see. And here in the studio, if you two have any comments or questions, that'd be great.
So here, Sarah, in a Korean stat that we just took a look at, we saw that more than 80% of people actually responded quite positively to quiet quitting. So how and why did this become a global phenomenon?
That is a good question. So many attributed global employment issues such as the Great Resignation and quiet quitting to the COVID-19 pandemic that has permanently altered the way people view work and work-life balance. So after the unprecedented global lockdown of 2 years or so, when the whole entire world was working remotely from home with limited mobility, the peak of the pandemic, it has had a psychological impact on people in general, and their lives and their values in lives have evolved. That impacted the way they look at work. So many people started to reflect, yes?
No, continue.
Oh, sure. So many people really started reflecting and questioning what is important in life and want their work or jobs to reflect their change in values. And just to add a little bit of stats here, in fact, GP's Global Employment Survey that was done in 2021 shows that employees are more likely to stay in their current job if that company or that job offers a remote or hybrid work model. So we do see that yes, it's interesting to see it. So we do see that employees and a portion of those employees amongst those stats are switching jobs to ones that offer flexibility.
It's quite interesting. Like, if the quiet quitting, I guess, trend continues, what could this mean for, let's say, workplace, company culture, the economy? What are some things that we should really look out for?
So the low engagement that goes hand in hand with quiet quitting can definitely spell trouble for companies because engaged employees are good for business. Research shows that engaged teams are up to 23% more profitable and 18% more productive. Furthermore, teams with low engagement see turnover rates that are up to 43% higher than those that are highly engaged. This is a problem because it's expensive and time-consuming to hire and train new employees. And apart from the engagement and productivity levels, companies can also run into talent retention issues because quiet quitters are likely to be looking at joining a company or getting a job that is more aligned with their personal values. So to combat this, we see many of those forward-thinking companies starting to change their company policies or make adjustments, such as offering those remote or hybrid work models as a part of their talent retention and attraction strategies.
I see. So it's all about flexibility for not only the quiet quitters, but also for the company.
Most definitely.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. It was a pleasure to have you here once again.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Now, if we bring the discussion back to the studio, any points that fascinated you two?
Oh, so many. But just to give you one, I think what Sarah mentioned was that in order to retain those talent and the new generation workers, she did mention that it's very important for the companies to take that first step and actually provide the benefits, or at least provide the environment that the new generation is looking for, such as remote workplaces, or maybe even providing the benefits that they find important. So that was something that definitely fascinated me.
And what about you, Walter?
Well, it was interesting that she said that 50% of American employees are considered quiet quitters. I mean, that's a very big statistic. When something is 50-50,
I know.
Yeah.
it's quite big.
Yeah.
And the fact that they even call them the 9-to-5 workers, which a long time ago, that was a normal thing.
Right.
But now it's not considered normal because they're not putting as much effort in. It's interesting to see how over the years has changed the perception of 9-to-5.
But one thing that hasn't changed, as Sarah mentioned, is that productivity will go up once you engage your employees there. And that's why flexibility seems to be so important. Now, we're going to be including our viewers in the discussion now. Given that we are a live morning program, we always ask our viewers questions related to our discussion topic in advance, and we use this time to share with you what they had to say. So if you take a look at our screen, we asked our viewers, have they ever heard of this concept? And Hussein Demir said, I've heard of the term quiet quitting and actually practiced it in my first job before actually quitting last month. And Raul said, I haven't heard of the term, but I'm so passionate and enthusiastic of my job and other things in life, you need to always give in your 100%. Dan Quentin James says, I've heard of it, but I retired at age 68 68. After working for 4 large American companies, I've never thought of quitting. So happy to be hearing from Dan, Quentin, James. Now, what are your thoughts on these comments, starting with Cheska?
So for me, what definitely stood out to me was the comparison between Hussein and Dan. So Hussein is someone that has heard of quiet quitting and actually practiced it in person, while Dan has never heard of it. And he's 68 and he's only moved 4 jobs and has never even thought about the idea of quiet quitting. So it's such an interesting comparison to see.
Definitely. And Walter?
Yeah, and also Raul was a person who hasn't heard of it as well. But what I find really interesting is that our show is based to teach the younger generation about obviously what's happening in the world, but we have an older audience as well that we're attracting as well.
Yes.
So that's awesome.
And it makes me so happy because the objective of NewsGen is to better understand the new generation, but also to narrow down any generation gaps. And all right, every day we do upload questions related to our discussion topic for our viewers to answer. And if you want to participate, please search Arirang News on YouTube and look into our community tab. The link is right below. Now, we've already come to the final part of our discussion for today. And Cheska, what has quiet quitting shown us and what can we do to move forward in a constructive manner?
That's a great question. I think this social trend has highlighted some of the very key issues in a society that both the employers and the talent ourselves need to address. And while Sarah mentioned and the Harvard Business Review said, it is very important for the companies to take that first step. However, I think as talent and individuals, we should really strive to find our purpose in work that is guided more by our passion than solely as a means of income, or maybe just to, as Walter said, you know, clock in and clock out. Because I think that lifestyle itself would automatically lead to the synchronization of fulfillment in all our priorities that we find very important, including self-care and self-fulfillment. And as Barry Schwartz said in his book, you know, Why Do We Work? I think we can start by asking the question, is it a job? Is it a career? Or is it a calling?
Definitely, and that's why I would like to ask, why do you work? What is the purpose
That's a great
of work?
question.
Exactly.
So why do you work, Walter?
Well, except for the money. No, except for, like, for me, I enjoy what I do. I'm very lucky to be in the position I am. I've been in terrible jobs in the past. And in the past, I was only mainly thinking of money. But now I think about the happiness. And now your job satisfaction within, it's that all goes back to that old saying, if you're happy with what you do or with your work, you don't work a day in your life.
Exactly.
Kind of
That's a great quote.
So yes.
And what about you, Cheska?
I work for News Generation.
That was an automated answer real quick. Exactly.
I'm ready to give you an answer. But obviously, again, through News Generation or through every work that I do, I seek to spread more positive influence. And actually through that, I sort of see my own personal self-growth. So there was a great quote that said, you know, you work not to better your skills, but to better yourself, and you find yourself through the work. So I agree.
I agree with you both. I work personally not only for a positive influence, but just to be a person you want to be working with, right?
Exactly. Right.
And I think that's what the younger generation is talking about. And that's why today we talked about an evolving work culture, and it's called quiet quitting. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you the topics that young people are talking about. Special thanks to Cheska Dain-hong.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here always.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.
Generation.